First, the first 3 days, the Swami stayed at Varanasi, and he was mostly sightseeing and meeting some notable people, including Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya, who welcomed the Swami at the premises of the Banaras Hindu University. Abhedananda was highly impressed with the profound scholarship of the Malavi, and when discussing with him about the educational problems of India, Abhedananda is reported to have made the following remarks. I notice a deficit of certain values in the character of the young generation all over India. So our educationists should give particular emphasis on character building of the student folk, on modern techniques instead of solely depending on ancient ideals. Everybody was impressed with this remark, which came from a sannyasin. In fact, since he returned to India, it was one of Swami Abhedananda's great dreams of how often did he say, whenever there was occasion for it, no nation in the world can aspire to be great unless it possesses men of strong character. The question of the formulation of the ideal character of the individual and nation should engage our serious attention. One day, while he was returning to the Ramakrishna Siva Ashram, Abhedananda, pointing to the garden of Durgabari, said to his attendant that 30 years ago it was at this place that he, along with Sharadananda, Satyananda, and Yogananda, had spent a number of days practicing all sorts of spiritual austerities and living by begging on alms. Who knew then that the Master trained us thus with a view to engage us with the task of preaching the universal message of Vedanta to thousands of people in the West? At Lahore, Swami Abhedananda was the guest of Mr. S.C. Chatterjee, who had the fortune of playing host to Swami Vivekananda when he visited. On arriving at Srinagar, he came to learn from the Maharaja's private secretary that all arrangements for his journey to Tibet was complete. Kashmir was to him a delightful spot full of unsurpassed scenic beauty. A man who has traveled almost half of the world and who has seen all that was beautiful elsewhere was now really taken by surprise as Abhedananda cast his glance over the hills and dales and lakes of Kashmir. From Rawalpindi to Srinagar, it was a stretch of about 200 miles on motorable road, with pine and cedar forests on both sides. As soon as he reached Srinagar, the capital city of Kashmir, Abhedananda's mind went to the distant past, and he recalled from the pages of ancient history the different religious periods which Kashmir had passed through. Here he enjoyed the shikara riding over the river Vitasta. He also visited with great interest the local museum, which contained a rich and varied collection, having archaeological importance. Among the ancient spots visited by Swami Abhedananda was the one known as the burial place of Jesus Christ at Kanagari, which lay below the foot of Hari Parvat, on the top of which stood the ancient fort, which was previously a Buddhist monastery during the heyday of Buddhism. As a preacher, the life of Christ had always interested Swami Abhedananda, and while in America, he gave some of the most interesting lectures on the life and message of this great prophet of humanity, whom is regarded as one of the saviors of the world. So it was but natural for him that he should feel attracted for the legendary spot where the earthly remains of Jesus the Christ were laid at rest. The legend that is Jesus came here secretly when his own country became hot for him, and the rest of his life was spent here. And hereafter, when he met with natural death, his body was laid to rest here. The burial place of Jesus appeared to Swami as a spot of holiness and purity. A few photographs were taken here, and thereafter Abhedananda went to visit a library known as the Vivekananda Pathakar, which was situated nearby. He was very delighted to see this small library founded in the memory of his beloved leader. The library contained almost all the works of Swami Vivekananda, There were pictures of great men on the walls, including those of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. It delighted him more than anything else to find that the message of the Master had spread in so distant a place as his. Many local people who had read his books came to see him. One day he also visited the local school where, at the request of the students, he delivered a lecture on the duties of the student. This was a subject of which he was never tired of speaking, and this was a clear proof, if any proof was needed, of his anxiety concerning the future of the younger generation of India. Thus, after staying at Srinagar for 3 days, Swami Abhedananda made preparations for his journey to Amarnath, accompanied by some fellow pilgrims, mostly Bengalis. It was on the first day of August 1922 that the party left Srinagar for Amarnath Cave. The pilgrimage of thousands of devotees to the faraway sacred shrine of Amarnath, nestled in a glacial gorge of the western Himalayas, through some of the most charming scenery in the world, is fascinating on the extreme. One is struck with the wonder at the quest and orderly way in which a canvas town springs up with incredible rapidity at every halting place, with its tents of various colors and of all shapes and sizes, with its bazaars and broad streets running through the middle, and all vanishing as quickly as the break of dawn, when the whole army of pilgrims sets out on the march again. The glow of countless cooking fires, the ashen-smeared sadhus under the canopy of their large garua umbrellas stuck in the ground, sitting and discussing or meditating before their dhunis, the sacred fires, the sannyasins of all orders in their various garbs, the men and women with children from all parts of the country in their characteristic costumes and their devout faces, the torches shimmering at nightfall, the blowing of conch shells and horns, the singing of hymns and the prayers and chants. All these are most impressive and convey to some extent an idea of the overmastering passion of the race for religion. So wrote Swami Abhedananda. A seasoned pilgrim as he was, Swami Abhedananda observed scrupulously all the customs and rules while on his pilgrimage to Amarnath, in the same way as was once noticed in Swami Vivekananda during his visit to the same holy shrine. The reader will find an intimate and almost day-to-day account of his journey to Amarnath in the Swami's own book, and as such we need not recapitulate it here. While he was on his way to the sacred shrine, Abhedananda could not but help recalling the days when Vivekananda visited this place, and how at the very sight of the ice lingam, the Amarnath Shiva, Vivekananda was overpowered by an exalted mood and had almost swooned with emotion. And also a great mystical experience had then come upon him, of which Abhedananda heard from some other brother disciples at Belur. When towards the end of the journey the party arrived at Shashanan, a place at 12,000 feet above sea level, he was delighted to see the beautiful lake surrounded on 2 sides with eternally snow-clad mountains, the water of which seemed to his eyes as bright green. Legend is that the water of this lake possessed healing qualities, and pointing to the lake, the Swami said to his attendant, "Look at the glaciers that are coming down from those mountains. It has been conjectured by our scripture that the snow-clad crest of the Himalayas represent the head of Lord Shiva, and these glaciers are the matted hair of his head." The surrounding was concerned all through with multicolored seasoned flowers, and the whole thing presented as if a piece of multicolored embroidery. As Swami Abhedananda wrote, "I have seldom come across such ravishing natural beauty anywhere in the world." At last he arrived at the cave of Amarnath. It was then he was in a mood of spiritual exaltation, as was natural with a devout pilgrim like him. It is not for us to fathom the sublime experiences of that great spiritual soul as he stood before the ice lingam with folded hands and with his gaze fixed on it. Time and space were forgotten instantly, and those who were privileged at that particular moment to look at the serene face of Swami Abhedananda, apparently lost in transcendentalness, saw something of the likes which they had never seen. It was indeed an inspiring spectacle to see Abhedananda standing in mute silence before the sparkling image which was to him the Lord himself. Really, he stood there face to face with Lord Shiva, just in the same exalted mood as was with Swami Vivekananda years earlier. Evidently, the whole personality of the Swami had then become fully saturated with the living presence of the Supreme Divinity as he stood there in rapt meditation. He bathed in the river Amravati that flowed by the cave, the waters of which look white. As such, the river is also known as Duganga, or the Ganges containing milky water. The return journey down the mountain to Pahalagan, the Swami recounted a story to his attendant which is worth reproducing. He said, "Here I recall my days in America. On one occasion, I, along with my friend, the Professor Parker, went on a mountaineering excursion in the Canadian Alps. We reached the height of nearly 18,000 feet, and we covered a distance of 48 miles on foot. And it took the others to cross this distance the same time, and they did it on horseback. There was a lake named the Emerald Lake, which was the most beautiful one I have ever seen. Returning to Srinagar, he spent a few days at Gulmarg, which was situated at a distance of 27 miles from the capital city of Kashmir. Gulmarg is the flower garden city of the valley, containing various flowers of all kinds. It was a sort of tableland having a length of 2 miles. Back to Srinagar, Abhedananda made preparations to visit Kshirabhavani. In Kashmir, it should be mentioned here, the Swami and his party were treated with the greatest considerations by the Maharaja, and all during his stay, and high officials and scholarly people visited the Swami's place to receive religious instruction and converse with him about general topics. One day he told his attendant, "Come, let us go to Shri Bhavani," which was visited by Swami Vivekananda. Following the pilgrimage to Shirabhavani, Swami Abhedananda returned to his houseboat at Srinagar. Here he is reported to have said to his attendant, "This is the route by which Gangadhar Maharaj, that is Swami Akhananda, had returned from Tibet. It is my desire to go to Tibet by the same route." We need not go into the details of his journey to Tibet, which the readers can read in his own book referred to, which contains a very intimate account of this daring adventure. Intimate and thrilling as well it is. The eternal pilgrim in Abhedananda cared neither for any hazards nor for any inconvenience of the road. He was accustomed to it since his youthful days. Indeed, he was a Parvarasha, par excellence, amongst the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Perhaps he stood second to none in this respect. So one day, accompanied by his attendant, he started his eventful journey to Tibet on foot by the banks of the river Indus, while all his essential articles, including a tent, were carried by 2 horses. "It had been my cherished dream," he said, "that all along to cross the Himalayas on foot. Let us see how far we can walk, and if necessary we might hire a horse from somewhere on the road." So saying, he took up his pilgrim staff and went on his way. And when at this distance of time we recall those days when Swami Abhedananda at 56 risked the hazards of this journey, we are simply reminded of the illustrious Bengali scholar Atish Dipankar, who centuries ago went on foot to Tibet to preach the message of Lord Buddha there. And they too were not young in age. So history repeats itself, and what a glorious repetition it was in our times, when a son of Saint Ramakrishna and a great Vedantic scholar went to Tibet on foot. In the study of Abhedananda's eventful long life, this particular episode has a special significance which should not be lost sight of, if only we went to realize the inherent greatness of this great wanderer of modern India. After crossing hundreds of miles on foot and through insurmountable and sometimes extremely precarious passages, Swami Abhedananda reached his destination, the monastery at Hemis in Tibet. It was on 4th October that he arrived there, and we gather from his diary that it took him about 2 months to complete the hazardous journey. Throughout this long track, he halted at several points, including the hill town of Leh, capital of Ladakh, and studied the social and religious customs prevailing at those places. He must have heaved a sigh of relief when he set foot on the soils of the Hemis monastery, and he must have also felt inwardly a sort of spiritual ecstasy for being able to cross the Himalayas on foot, which was his cherished dream. Here are a few lines of this successful journey taken out of the pages of his diary. In 1922, I went to Tibet from Kashmir, crossing the Himalayas on foot, to study manners, customs, and the Buddhist philosophy which prevailed among the Tibetan lamas. I went along the Yarkand Road, the highway to Europe, and stopped at Leh, the capital of Ladakh in western Tibet. My destination was the Hemis Monastery, about 25 miles north of the city of Leh. It was a fine morning on the next day when Abhedananda went to visit the celebrated monastery, accompanied by some lamas, the Tibetan priests. Of this monastery, as we have already indicated, the Russian traveler Novatovich, in his work entitled The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, has written extensively. Those who have read this work and considered soberly its strange, intriguing research, in which no scholar has so far been able to refute, may realize that it was no ideal quest on the part of Swami Abhedananda to risk the journey, more as a historian than religious monk, to that monastery with a view to verify and confirm what had been published by Notovich. This was Abhedananda, whose nature was to go into the source of the things and always see for himself the truth of it. It is this remarkable trait that distinguished him from his brother disciples. As soon as he presented himself as the threshold of the Gumpa, Abhedananda was cordially received by a senior lama who ushered him outside or inside the main hall. And here he was first requested to write his name in the visitor's book, which was held before him by a younger lama. He signed his name in English, thus Swami Abhedananda, Vice President of the Ramakrishna Mission, and Belur Muth, Calcutta. As he did so, he looked through the other pages of the visitor's book, and out of curiosity found not a single name of a Bengali monk. Here it should be pointed out that Abhedananda returned to India after the particular request of Swami Brahmananda to take over the vice presidency of the mission, and also to look after its administration, and he remained in that capacity until 1929. Abhedananda's description of the Hemis monastery is really interesting. Nothing of significance escaped his inquisitive observation. The readers would do well to refer to his account given in the book. After going round the monastery accompanied by the lamas and looking after many things that were interesting, he inquired about the manuscript on the basis of which Notovich wrote his revealing book. He was then shown a large scroll which was carefully preserved among the various valuable collections in the monastery. But the Lama said, "But this is not the original manuscript, it is just a copy." The original is in a nearby monastery known by the name of Marber, which is written in Pali. This one is in Tibetan language. As he looked through the manuscript, Abhedananda found it divided into 14 chapters, consisting of 244 slokas. He then requested the Lama to have some portion of it translated into English for him, and the Lama gladly complied with the Swami's request. After visiting the Hemis monastery, he returned to Srinagar by a shorter route and reached there towards the end of October. He then wanted to visit Taxila, the famous Buddhist seat of learning. He left Kashmir in the first week of November and arrived in Rawalpindi, whence he proceeded to Taxila, where he visited the ruins of the ancient city and other objects of interest. Here, as he stood on the ruins of this ancient city, his mind flew back to the past centuries when Indian civilization was at its apex, and when India witnessed the flowering of her finest cultural genius. As he wrote, anybody who desires to understand the true significance of the Indian civilization during the early period of the Magadhan hegemony, you shall have to turn to Taxila. He spoke of the architectural beauty of Buddhist temples there, but what pleased him most was the Taxila Museum, where some precious objects were preserved. As he said to his attendant, "You should know that we owe to Lord Curzon for the preservation of these precious articles and places of historical interest. The preservation of this ancient Indian monument act was perhaps his best gift to India." At Taxila, he also gave 2 lectures, one on the Hindu religion, the Sanatana Dharma, and the other on life beyond death. In the final phase of his journey, he visited Peshawar, whence he returned to Lahore in the first week of November. The presence of Swami Abhedananda at Lahore was an object of delight to all the residents of the place, and they wanted to hear something from his lips. We gather from the reminiscences of the late Paramahansa, the celebrated scholar and leader of the Hindu Mahasabha, that Swami Abhedananda gave one public lecture at Lahore and another in the National College, which was presided over by Lala Hashra, the principal of the college, and was especially arranged by Paramahansa. It was addressed exclusively to the students. Besides advising the students, he also narrated some of his experiences in America. "I have never heard," Paramahansa wrote, "such soul-stirring lectures in my life as the one I heard on that day, November the 10th, 1922, when the great Vedantic preacher and scholar, the Venerable Swami Abhedananda, addressed the students of our college. It was indeed an unforgettable experience for me, and also for those who were present on that occasion. He spoke for about an hour. It was a magnificent speech, the greatest I have ever heard, and it made a lasting impression on the minds of the audience, which consisted mainly of the students. I have still vivid recollections of some of the brilliant lines uttered by the Swami, the dignity of whose majestic appearance is still fresh in the scroll of my memory. When at the end of his speech he exhorted on the necessity of training our young men properly and strictly according to the ancient Indian ideals, and at the same time accepting what is good in the Western education, there was loud cheers in the college hall, which was packed to capacity on that memorable occasion. After staying for about 3 weeks at Lahore, he left the place and came to Rishikesh on December the 1st. This particular place of pilgrimage has, as we know, played an important role in his early life insofar as the development of his self-realization was concerned. This is why the place always remained fresh in his memory, and this his accounts for the revisiting while making the return journey to Calcutta. Here he stayed for about a week, and during that time he went to visit the Kailash Muth, founded by the eminent Vedantic scholar Dhanagiri. The head of the Kailash Muth, Gobindananda Giri, extended to him a cordial reception as Abhedananda entered inside the monastery. Gobinda Ananda was his classmate at the time when he was a pupil at Dhanrajgiri. Gobindananda's joy knew no bounds when he met Abhedananda after 3 decades. "So you are now a famous preacher. We have heard much about your achievements in the West. It is very kind of you to visit us." These words of Gobindananda must have touched the heart of his classmate. Though there was a warm and pressing invitation for him to stay there, yet Abhedananda had his food there by begging alms from a local satra, as in the days of old, which surprised the Mahat of the Muth. Swami Abhedananda, of international reputation, to beg alms from the satras just like in the days of his spiritual sadhana, showed that he was a true sannyasin and a real disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Abhedananda then went to Kankal and stayed there at the Ramakrishna Siva Ashram, where he also initiated some aspirants into sannyasin and brahmacharya. He left Hardware on December 8th and reached Calcutta on the 11th of December. The birthday ceremony of the Holy Mother came off on that particular day, and it was duly observed at the Belur Monastery, and about 2,500 people were provided with prasad. It is needless to mention that Swami Abhedananda participated in the ceremony with utmost devotion, befitting the son of the Holy Mother, and thus ended one complete year since his return to India.